Hello there, and welcome to the channel. Well, you may be thinking, what is she doing? And here's the problem. I'm halfway through my project. It's episode 156. And my beautiful Nikon camera, it's not reading my cards anymore, so I'm in a disaster zone. So today I'm gonna try to make do with this, and then we'll see how I proceed forward on this, because I really don't know how I'm gonna make this work, but we're gonna try this. Today, I'm going to tell you 3 more stories about John, because I don't have an interview today. And even if I did have an interview today, I couldn't do it because, well, okay. So, John's story number 1. When I started teaching here in Roswell, John was teaching in Santa Rosa, and he was the voice of the Lions. He would go. He actually broadcast the games. He called them for the local radio station, and that way people who couldn't go to the games could see the games in a way by hearing him call them. Or if they couldn't be in town for the games, he would call them there locally. So he was the voice of the Lions, and that's how he really got into nicknaming the kids, like nicknaming the players and everything. And he really loved football. I mean, he could discuss it. And he liked watching it. Now, I understand football. I've watched it a lot. I could never get worked up about it if I didn't know the players. I was more likely to be caught up in the game if I knew the players' names and who they were and what they did and that kind of thing. But John just loved football. He just loved football. And so he was the voice of the Lions. And one time, the Lions were going to be playing in Dexter. They were going to play the Dexter Demons. So John did this amazing thing. He came down to visit at my apartment when I was living on the corner of 8th and Penn. And he had me drive him to the game. And the big memory I have of driving him to that football game down in Dexter, there are 2 of them. One of them was that it rained really heavily that day, like it's raining today. And the water was to the curbs, but we went anyway. And I was driving, and I almost drove in front of an oncoming truck because I was so excited. So I was excited about John letting me drive him. And it turned out to be a wonderful experience. I don't recall much about the game. I recall sitting in the stands, and I recall him being in the press booth, but that's about it. The second football story that I want to tell you is actually about the Cowboys. He was a big Cowboys fan, and in 1972, the Super Bowl was with the Cowboys, and I'm not sure who they played. I think it was the Dolphins, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, he was home on winter break from college. At that time, the Super Bowl was quite a bit earlier in the year. And he was home on winter break, and he was very excited about the game. Like, very excited. Like, every time the players made a mistake, he screamed and yelled and jumped up and down. And my dad, it was one of those times when my dad just figured, I'm not going to be able to do anything about this. He's saying really adult language in front of the children. So Ryan was just a baby, a toddler, and I was pretty young. And so Daddy came in to Mother and said, let's go for a ride. And so we all got in the car and went for a ride. I think we drove all the way to Moriarty. It's about 17 miles away, and went to Hable. That was the little drive-in restaurant in Moriarty at that time that we'd go to. I believe the Cowboys won that game. They didn't win all their Super Bowl journeys, but I think they won that one. The third football story I'm going to tell you, my favorite football story about John, is from 1968 when I was really little. and he was still in high school. We were living in Carrizozo, and and we had this family that was friends. You know, we were two friend families, the Sadlers, and the Sadlers had come over, and the Sadler boys were watching with John the football game between the New York team, and I think it was the LA team, so it's the two coasts, right? And I think it was the New York Jets and the Raiders. And I've already mentioned that one of the most important and pivotal books of my life was Heidi. And when I was 5, Heidi was like it. And Heidi, they had a movie of Heidi that they made, and I was so excited about it. And it was scheduled to be shown that night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, which meant 5 o'clock in Carrizozo. So this was the policy on network TV, and which is, I'm going to go over it just briefly so you'll understand how big a thing this was. At that time, on network television, the schedule was set, and it would not be changed for a sporting event unless a certain executive called in and told the person operating the projection system to slide the programming. In other words, to move the programming back. The schedule was followed, okay? So this game was going on, and Kyla, who was my best friend, she was a Sadler too. Kyla and I were walking around saying, well, Heidi's coming on at 5, Heidi's coming on at 5. My brother John kept saying, they are not going to preempt this football game for Heidi, okay? And it was one of those moments where I was already, I was 5 and I was using my teacher voice. Well, you know, Heidi is coming on. And John had his teacher voice out. They are not going to change the programming for Heidi. But John didn't know something. John didn't know that there was a snafu in New York where the booth was to make the decision to slide the programming. The executive who needed to call in and say, slide Heidi, couldn't get through. And guess what happened? The game was going on. It was in the last few minutes of the game. And at 5 o'clock on the dot, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, they snapped the football and there's a goat on a hill. And Kyla and I were like, Heidi! And we ran in there and laid down in front of the TV. It's Heidi. We told you Heidi would be on. It's Heidi. We're watching Heidi. My brother exploded. The Sadler boys exploded. And evidently every male from LA to New York who was watching the game exploded as well. And then the lines really lit up in New York. And then I think the switchboard was knocked out. So the really sad part was the team that was losing at the time the cutoff took place scored twice and then won. Well, this infamous game became known as the Heidi Bowl. And it changed executive rules. The rule then became, after that, on broadcast television, if there's a sporting event on, you slide the upcoming programming unless told to do otherwise. It was that important. It changed the policy of the networks. And for kids who weren't alive during that time, there were only 4. There was ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. 4 choices. All policies shifted that day. The day, or because of that day, the day of the Heidi Bowl, November 1968. You can look it up. I love that Heidi preempted the football game because It was the first time in my life I felt like God loved me as much as he loved my brother John. Everybody loved my brother John. And I just figured he must be God's favorite too. In a way, maybe he was. John certainly knew how to have fun better than the rest of us. Here goes my phone again. People did want to make John happy. Lots of people wanted to make John happy. Me too, me included. I wanted to make John happy. That's it for today. I hope to have addressed my technical issues soon, although I don't know how soon. I do, after all, live in the hinterlands, not on the east or west coast. So we'll see how this goes. But I hope you see me again soon, you gorgeous people.